Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel speech at a public meeting held in connection with the Independence Week celebration, New Delhi, 11th August 1947. Our first task is to stabilize, consolidate, and strengthen ourselves, and the rest can have only a secondary priority. My colleagues and I have agreed to partition of the country not because of fear or out of a sense of defeat. Under the prevailing conditions in the country, partition on the present pattern was the best possible, and I have no qualms about it. In a matter of weeks, we have divided the country, the army, the services, etc., and this indeed has been a colossal task. I, however, strongly believe that those who have seceded today will be disillusioned soon, and their union with the rest of the India is assured. What nature and God had intended to be one can on no account be split into two for all times. I appeal to you to rub out from your minds the memories of the past 2 years, deem it as a terrible nightmare and forget it, and to look forward with a single-minded purpose to make India strong, prosperous, and happy. This can only be done by hard work. A socialist government in Britain is calling upon the workers to sweat an hour more a day, and the strange contrast here is that our socialists and others preach strikes and encourages wage boosts. This can only result in printing more notes at Nasik and end up in serious trouble. I welcome Mr. Liaquat Ali Khan's latest statement, and I am happy that minorities in Pakistan would be protected and their rights safeguarded. Such a generous move by the League cannot but evoke reciprocity in India. I am sure that all Indian states will join the Indian Union, and none can afford to keep it out and live in isolation. First things should be done first, and the first job is to get the states to accede to and thereby consolidate the Union. The demand of the people in the states for a democratic regime raises an entirely different issue. I cannot see how an Indian ruler can exist with a subject in hostility and clamoring for a popular government. The Congress was pledged to rid the country of foreign domination, and after making considerable sacrifices and prolonged suffering, it has succeeded. But the Congress has worked for a united India and a union of all communities, and unfortunately it cannot claim any success there. This has been due to factors beyond our control. Our joy on 15th August would have been fuller and greater had not India been divided, but this is not to be for the present. I would make no efforts to explain away the responsibility of the Congress for dividing the country. We took these extreme steps after great deliberations. In spite of my previous strong opposition to partition, I agreed to it because I felt convinced that in order to keep India united, it must be divided now. My experience in the office during the past year showed that it was impossible to do anything constructive with Muslim League in. The League representatives during their continuous office did nothing but create deadlocks, and their role was entirely an obstructive one. Besides, as I have already said, I found the Muslims, save for a few exceptions, engaged in all capacities in the government were with Muslim League. Thus, the rot had set in, and it could not be permitted to continue any longer except at the risk of disaster for the whole country. Indeed, at one stage, and it obtains even now to some degree, things had become so bad that the killing in Calcutta, riots spread all over, and it became perilous adventure for Hindus and Muslims to visit one another's localities. The economic life of the country was paralyzed, and there was little security of life or property. The only way out of this sickening situation, the Congress realized, lay in the elimination of the third party, the British power. The British, on their part, declared that they would quit by June 1948, but that period was long, very long. Also, their statement promising to hand over power to the authorities in the provinces gave rise to a vigorous effort to dislodge ministries in Assam, the Punjab, and frontier. The League decided in the Punjab, even though they failed in frontier and Assam. The League movement caused great misery and bloodshed. In order to settle the issue immediately and prevent the slaughter of innocent people, the Congress decided to agree to division of the country and demanded partition of Punjab and Bengal. This was no surrender to the League threats or policy of appeasement. Today, the partition of India is settled fact, and yet it is an unreal fact. The partition, I hope, however, removes the poison from the mind and body politic of India. This, I am sure, would result in seceding areas desiring to reunite with the rest of India. India is one and indivisible. One cannot divide the set or split the running waters of a tree, the running waters of a river. The Muslims have their roots in India. Their sacred places and their cultural centers are located here in India. I do not know what they can do in Pakistan, and it will not be long before they begin to return. Most of the opposition of the Congress in this partition came from the quarters which had never in the past given evidence of any strength. Despite the division, it must be remembered that we have 80% of the country with us, which is a compact unit with great possibilities. 20% has gone over to Pakistan, and I wish that state all success and prosperity. I wish them to be strong, because then alone there can be friendly relations and amity between the two states. There can be no friendship between a strong unit and a weakling. India harbors no ill will towards Pakistan and will not, in fact, do all in her power to help the new state. That is what we assure. The main task before India today is to consolidate herself into a well-knit and united power. The obstacle of the foreign denomination is still not fully gone, but there are serious problems that confront us. Economically, India is in a sad plight. The war has resulted in making India a creditor nation, but that does not mean much. The United Kingdom is our debtor and owes a huge amount, but she does not appear to be having to pay us now. In fact, the big powers have so arranged their economies that smaller and poor countries remain at a disadvantage. The socialists in India are always taking and talking of a socialist republic. Instead of restricting their activities to mere agitation, I would ask them to take over the administration of one province and solve the problems which have arisen in the wake of prolonged war. In contrast to their counterparts in Great Britain, the Indian socialists are pursuing an opposite course. Strikes are encouraged and higher wages demanded. If there is no water in the well, none can draw any to drink. But all means to let them take away the wealth of a few rich in the country, but to what extent would this effort bring any relief to the poor, the teeming millions? The need of the hour is to increase the wealth of the country, and this can be done only by putting in more hard work, effort, and thus increasing production. This requires the maintenance of peace in the country. For 1 year now, there has been disorder in the country. Now that the Pakistan has been established, there is no quarrel between Hindus and Muslims. If unfortunately there should be recurrence of the strife, it would not be the cowardly killing of innocent people, but a battle between the two armies of the two states. I appeal to people not to indulge in mutual strife, but to create a calm atmosphere and engage themselves in constructive activities which are essential for the building up of a new India. As regards the state's question, the cooperation of all the rulers is necessary to consolidate and strengthen the Indian Union. When the foreign powers have been eliminated, the princes will have to adjust themselves to new democratic order. The days of the rulers who do not command the confined confidence of their subjects are numbered. The majority of the states have acceded to the Union, and I appeal to the rest of them to join before 15th August. States which do not come in now may decide to join a little later, would have to accede on different terms. These days, no state can afford to live in isolation. I ask the people to exercise reserve in judging the role of princes at the present juncture. The rulers have not been free up to now, till now, and many of them do not even now believe that paramountcy is lapsing on 15th August, many of them being descendants of great and benevolent rulers of the past ages. I have no doubt that they would not hesitate in pursuing a correct policy and becoming popular rulers. Our problems are mainly domestic. Ever since I was released from the prison, I have been saying that imperialism is on its last legs, not only in India but in Asia. The British are quitting India and I think the Dutch imperialism will meet its end in Indonesia. There cannot be any future anymore separate electorates or weightages and special treatment. Every community must get what is its dues. But if a community which forms 15% of the population has 60% of representation, say in police department, it is undoubtedly creates a problem. As regards the agitation for cow protection, I agree with the demand, but I ask that no such agitation was sponsored in the past. In countries where cows enjoyed no legal protection, they are looked after much better and yield more milk. But at a time when the government are faced with the problem of protecting human beings, the question of protecting cows cannot have the priority. I deprecate attempts which are supposed to unite the country but in fact divide Hindus. Nobody today except the Congress can undertake the task of uniting the country. India has nothing but goodwill towards all. But if her safety is endangered, she must have the strength to defend herself, and for this, people must work. They must come together. They must work together.